Alright, Shalom. Of course, I'm going to start off by giving all praise to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Yahweh, which is the name of the Most High, and Yahweh Shai, which is the name of the only begotten Son, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. And just going to be a little spiritual flow, man. Excuse me if you hear the noise in the background. I'm currently outside. And one thing I wanted to start off with saying is you have this character going around. I believe he calls himself, what is it, M-I-A or something like that. His YouTube channel is called M-I-A. I don't know what that stands for. If I was to take a guess, the most likely, thing it stands for would be military Israelite agent, right? Military Israelite agent, right? Or military Israelite actor, right? As Mind of God would say, right? Military Israelite actor, MIA. Just my little guess on that. You'd have to ask him. But the reason I'm bringing him up is he actually made a video responding to something I was speaking about. And the thing that he had a problem with is the topic of reincarnation in the scriptures, specifically dealing with John the Baptist being Elijah, right? And I made an hour-long video, just about an hour, trying to debunk that, which he clearly went off. Now he was trying to say something along the lines of, well, John said that he wasn't, Elijah. So see, that means he wasn't. It's like, well, wait a second, though. Wait a second. So who do I believe then? Do I believe what John said, or do I believe what Christ said? And that's a real question, because it's true that John said, when they asked him, are you, the Elijah, he said no. But then Christ, later on, Christ said that he was. So, wait a second. So what one of them's right and what one's wrong? And I have the answer for that. The answer is that John didn't know that he was Elijah. Right? He didn't know that he himself was Elijah, in reincarnation. Because you can't remember your past life, man. Just like, I'll give an example. That's even more simple. Right? Just like if I was to ask you to describe to me the first 3 years of your life. Okay, I guarantee you really won't be able to recall, much of a memory. Especially like, I'll give an example. If someone asked you, well, describe to me, what happened at your birth. Right? Do you remember, literally when you were born? Of course not. Nobody, knows that. Doesn't matter if you're 15, doesn't matter if you're 20, 40. It don't matter. Nobody can remember. Right? And that's in this life. Right? So how is it far-fetched to say that, if someone's reincarnated, they won't be able to remember their past life? How is that too far-fetched if even in this modern life we're living right now, me and you can't remember when we were born? All right? So, that bears, witness to my argument, right? That John didn't know that he was Elijah because he couldn't remember, his past life, because that was blocked from his memory. But then the question comes in, is because Christ said in Matthew 17, starting at verse 10 on down, Christ said that, John the Baptist is Elijah. He did not say in the, the likeness. He said that he is Elijah. All right? Just like I'll give this example. You got guys going around that don't believe, in Christ. You got guys going around who don't subscribe, to who the world calls Christ, right? They believe that he's like, either he didn't exist, or they believe that he's like, a false teacher, right? But here it is. It's like you ask them, well, wait a second. If that's the case, well, why does it tell you in the Old Testament it prophesies of Christ then? And if you go to Isaiah the 7th chapter, Isaiah the 9th chapter, Isaiah the 53rd chapter, those are all, references to Christ. And that's in the Old Testament. Okay, because Christ wasn't on the scene yet. So those were, prophecies that would, show us that when the Christ comes, we'll be able to tell that he really is, the Christ by what he did. Like, all you got to do is read, Isaiah 53, and then you can clearly read the story of Christ and how he was, crucified. And you can clearly tell that Isaiah 53 was clearly speaking of who the world calls Christ. Okay? So going back to the argument, is Christ said that John the Baptist was Elijah, who was not in the likeness of him. He physically was him himself. Why? Because he was reincarnated, into his body. Right? He was Elijah in reincarnation. And then he went on a rant and said that reincarnation is not in the Bible. It's like, okay, well, if that's the case, well, I have a couple questions for you then, if that's not the case. What about in, what is that? If you go to, I want to say Job 19 and verse 25 on down, Job said that, I'm going to die in my physical body, but yet in my physical body, I shall see, the second coming of Christ. Right? I'll see the Christ, in my own body, with my own eyes, even though I'm going to die in my flesh. And I'm nearly paraphrasing it. You can read it yourself. Job 19:25. Okay? So that proves reincarnation. But I won't just leave you with one. All right, it's definitely, decent amount of precepts that can be used to prove it. What about Daniel, the 12th chapter? It said that, Daniel would stand in his lot at the end of days. All right, so wait a second. They weren't in the end of days when that was written, because that was before Christ's time. Okay, so we're talking, thousands of years ago, man. Okay, so wait a second. So what did it mean by Daniel will stand in his lot in the end of days? Obviously, it was because he would be, back again on the earth, in the last times. Right? He would be brought back onto the earth again. So his spirit would be reincarnated into a body here on the earth. Okay, because what happens when when you pass away? When you die, your spirit, it departs from your body and goes up to the Most High. Then your physical, flesh, or your physical body, it deteriorates and goes back into the earth. Right? Because we were made of the elements of the earth. So therefore, over time, once we're buried, our bodies decay and then they turn back into earth. Right? But our spirit, that lives on. Right? That goes up to the Most High. And it goes to, sleep. And there's many precepts on that. So I'm not going to go deep on that. But that's what happens when you die. Your spirit departs from your physical flesh and goes to the Most High. Excuse me. But, the Lord has the option, to put your spirit, in another body, right? Meaning what? You're born again into a new body, but you're the same spirit, right? So that's basically reincarnation in the scriptures. And I got more for you. What about what is that? Revelation 1 and 7. It says that every eye shall see the Christ when he returns, and it says even they who pierced him. Right, there was 2 men that pierced the Lord's side when he was on the cross, so it said they're going to see him too. So wait a second. Unless you're a preterist, which I don't believe you are, how would you explain that? Unless those 2 men are back on the earth today, right, by reincarnation. And I got one more for you, and that would be what about this one? Revelation chapter 10 and verse 11. It says what? The angel told John that he would have to go preach before many nations, people and kingdoms again. But here's the catch, though, is that when that was written, John died on the island of Patmos, which is where he, wrote down, his writings. So he didn't get a chance to go teach to any other people after that. So my question to you is either that was incorrect, so either the scriptures are wrong, or you must agree, and that proves that he must have been reincarnated. I brought this question up to a preterist who called into one of our recent shows. I asked him, what does that mean? Because he didn't believe in reincarnation either, right? So I asked him that, and he tried to say, oh, well, it was speaking to us, right? Like me and you, it was speaking to. It's like, no, it's not. Because the angel was the one who was speaking to John in that chapter, right? The angel was speaking to John, saying that you must go and do this. It's not talking about me and you, like me talking and you listen. That's not what it's talking about. It was talking to John himself, that he would have to go and teach before many people and nations and kings. So my question is, when did he do that? Because he died not too far after, he wrote that. So he didn't get a chance, to go and, to teach. All right, so that's, A.S. Tazariak would say, that's a body bag. I was listening to, some of the, what are those guys called, a radio show? Yeah, Across the Line Radio, which I'm going to have to call in, man. I'm going to have to call in to Cross the Line Radio during one of their next live shows, man, because I know they go live. I believe it's, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m., if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to have to call into one of their shows, man. Because I want to ask them a question about, which I'm just messing with them. I already know the answer. But I just want to test and see if they know. Because I was listening to one of their shows. Somebody called in and asked about Joshua 10 and 12. Right? Because they were trying to, come at the whole flat earth thing. Right? So I was listening. And they brought up Joshua 10 and 12. And they basically were saying that, that doesn't prove nothing. Right? That don't prove nothing. It's like, well, wait a second, though. According to you guys, you believe that, the sun and the moon are the one who, do you believe that the earth, revolves around the sun, and that the moon goes around that as well in its orbit? But according to the scriptures, the sun and the moon are actually the ones orbiting around the earth. Right, like a clock, right, like a wall clock, right? That's the same way that in the scriptures, the sun and the moon are the ones in movement. And Joshua 10 and 12 clearly proves that, because it says that the sun stayed and the moon stood still. So wait a second. By logical deduction, that must mean that the sun and the moon were the ones who were in motion, not the earth itself, because it said the sun stood still and the moon stayed. So how the hell did they stay still if they weren't moving in the first place? And another one, I wanted to ask this: what about Psalms, the 19th chapter, starting at verse 1? It speaks about the sun having an orbit, right? The sun moves around in an orbit. That's what it basically says. You can read it yourself. But it's given a parable, but at the same time, it shows that the sun's the one who's in movement and not the earth itself. There's too many places in the scriptures to speak about, the earth itself, being unmovable. Right? The earth itself doesn't move. The earth is fixed. All right, but rather, the sun and the moon are the ones who, are in motion over us. All right, and that's why you have something, if you do the research on this, which it was clear those brothers didn't really know a whole lot about that subject. And it's funny because what they'll say is like, oh, we'll go find the edge. It's like, well, wait a second. Nobody believes in the edge. So how the hell could you go fall off it? That don't make no damn sense. So that would be like if I asked, okay, we'll go fall off the edge of space. Then it'll be like, oh, well, space don't have an edge. It goes on forever. You know what I'm saying? Ridiculous. Here's the thing. Look up on Google sunspots. All right, now you'll have two resorts that pop up. As you might see, picture of the sun with like a black spot in it. That's not what I'm saying. There's another thing out there of people who are higher up on like a plane or, balloon footage, right, from the high altitude balloons, where they show, when they record the sun, they show that right underneath the sun in a small area, the clouds are all lit up under the light of the sun. Now, that's not possible if the sun is 93 million miles away. That's not possible. The whole area should be lit up, not, a small portion right underneath, the sun. But that's what we see, where the small portion of clouds are completely lit up, hotter or more bright than the other clouds that are surrounding it. So that undeniably proves by logic that the sun cannot be, what they're telling us. It can't be. That's not possible. That's absolutely not possible if the sun's 93 million miles away for it to, cast, more light onto a small portion of clouds that are directly underneath the sun. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make any logical sense, to believe that going off the information we see. And then another one is that, which I won't go for too much longer. There's experiments that we've actually done. I haven't done it myself, but there's other people out there who have done them, where they show that, bear with me for a second, where they show that the moon, right, the light of the moon is actually colder than the than the sun, right? Because they tell us in school that the moon, reflects the sunlight, right? That's how the moon has its light. Well, that's not true, because there's experiments that people have done where, the moon casts its, if you can get lucky, you can find an area where the moon shines completely down onto the, onto the earth. And I remember a couple years back, that was right behind my house, right? You should know what I'm talking about. That, once in a while you'll find a spot where the moon completely is like right overhead, so that there's a little area there that's lit up more than the area outside of it. It's like a little circle, right? So if you can find that, you can measure, the inside of the circle, compared to the outside of it, right, anywhere else outside of it, and you'll find out that it's actually colder inside that circle than it is anywhere else. So that proves that the moon has cold light, that it's a light of its own, just as the scriptures tell you in the book of Genesis, right? That the sun gives its own light and the moon also gives its own light. So how do they answer that one? How the hell, if the moon is reflecting the sun's light, but then how the hell can we measure the light of the moon, right? If you're directly under it, it's colder than the, anywhere else you could, see the, how cold it is. And I'm, trying to explain it to the best of my ability, but, there's videos out there you can find on the internet where people, try these experiments, and the results are what I'm telling you here. You can find it. You just gotta, do some digging, okay? Because you'll find out that this topic is censored online. A couple years back when people were first talking about it, you could, you could go on YouTube, look up, Flat Earth, and you'll find, a reasonable amount of videos, proving it, and then you'll also find some trying to disprove it. But now today, you do the same thing, or look that up, and you'll find out that every video for the first, 25 pages, if not more, maybe first 50 pages, every video is about debunking the, the flat earth. So that shows you that they're shadow banning the subject. So someone who's interested and they do a search on it, they're not going to find, information that, supports the idea. They're only going to be presented with information that disproves the idea. And I noticed that. I believe they started doing that like a year or two ago. Okay, but, there's a few years back when it was first popular, you could look it up and you could find, anything you wanted, on there. But now it's all censored. You know what I'm saying? Which I'm not going to go for much longer, as I said. And I just wanted to just do a quick video. Hope that was edifying. And I'm going to say shalom.